On the 22nd of October 2012, a man sat down in front of the world, looked Oprah Winfrey in the eyes, and revealed a lie he had rehearsed for over a decade.
Yes or no? Did you ever take banned substances to enhance your cycling performance?
He had beaten cancer, raised millions, won 7 tours. He was supposed to be a hero. But in that moment, the illusion collapsed.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
Yeah.
That man was Lance Armstrong. And this is the story of how he didn't just cheat the sport, he built a machine so powerful it corrupted the entire system around him. Doctors, teammates, governing bodies, sponsors, even the labs meant to catch the cheaters, they all fell in line. This is the biggest scandal in cycling history, but it didn't start on a bike. It started in a hospital room with a man who was supposed to die. This is a story that cycling's highest powers would rather erase from memory, not just because it exposed a cheater, but because it exposed their own involvement in this crime. They didn't just allow this crime to happen, they helped make it possible. It was a scandal powered by bloody bags, testosterone patches, and cover-ups. A story that crushed whistleblowers, scared journalists, and rewrote what it meant to win. It was a system built around one man so that he can become a machine built to dominate. And they almost got away with it. But if we really want to understand how Lance Armstrong became untouchable, we have to go back to the early 90s. To a time before Livestrong, before the yellow jersey became a symbol, before the world realized how deep the rot ran. In the early 1990s, professional cycling wasn't in ruins and the top riders were far from clean. It was sick and everyone knew it. From blood transfusions to testosterone patches and sometimes EPO, riders were doping not to win, but just to keep up. By 1993, one anonymous rider told a reporter, "If you don't take EPO, you don't stay in the sport." The UCI, cycling's governing body, claimed to enforce the rules, but off the record, they knew the truth. In 1996, hematocrit levels in riders were exploding at an all-time high. The legal threshold was set to 50%, but tests were showing numbers over 60 and no one was sanctioned. Doctors like Michel Ferrari, who would later work with Armstrong, weren't hiding either. Then, one day, the pool of corruption finally broke. In July 1998, the Tour de France was brought to its knees. On the eve of the race, customs officials stopped a team car belonging to Festina, a major French squad. Inside, they found over 400 vials of banned substances, EPOs, amphetamines, steroids, syringes. It was basically a mobile pharmacy on wheels. What followed became known as the Festina Affair. This scandal was so big that the Tour de France was suddenly brought to a halt. So many top riders confessed. Teams were thrown out mid-race. The police raided hotel rooms. Riders staged sit-ins. The tour nearly collapsed. For the first time in decades, entire stages were cancelled. And for a brief moment, it looked like the sport might clean up. But that crisis also created something else. It created a space for a new champion. Into that vacuum stepped a man with nothing to lose. A rider who saw chaos and saw opportunity. That man was Lance Armstrong. But before he ever touched a yellow jersey, he had already tasted what it meant to be great. But almost overnight, it was taken from him. What happened next would turn him into something far more dangerous than a comeback story. To understand how this monster was built, we have to go back to where it all began. In 1992, a 20-year-old Lance Armstrong signed his first professional contract with the Motorola cycling team. Loud, raw, aggressive. He was a former triathlete with the lungs of a marathoner and the legs of a sprinter. And while most rookies respected the peloton's quiet traditions, Armstrong didn't care. He didn't just want to race, he wanted to dominate. In 1993, he won Stage 6 of the Tour de France in a thunderstorm. The rain was insane, but Armstrong powered through it like it was nothing. The same year, he became the youngest man to ever win the UCI Road World Championships. America finally had a star, a brash young talent in a European-dominated sport whom they could support. And for a moment, it looked like nothing could stop him. But Grand Tours don't reward strength alone. Over the next 3 years, Lance faltered. He could win one-day races, short stage races like the Tour du Pont, which he won in 1995 and 1996, but never a full Tour de France. He lacked the endurance, the discipline, the mountain legs. But then came the pain he couldn't ride through. On October 2nd, 1996, Armstrong woke up with a pounding headache. His vision was blurry, he was coughing up blood, and one of his testicles was badly swollen. He flew to Austin and checked in with Dr. Jim Reeves, a local urologist. But instead of what should have been a regular checkup, Lance was dealt a devastating blow.
On Wednesday, October 2nd, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer.
He had stage 3 testicular cancer, which had already spread to his lymph nodes, lungs, abdomen, and brain. His chances of survival were, according to his doctor, almost none.
Clearly, he had less than a 50% chance of surviving his illness based on the distribution of the disease at the time of diagnosis.
We told Lance 20 to 50%, mostly to give him hope, but with what we saw in those scans, there was almost no hope. Lance had to temporarily retire from cycling. Most athletes would have accepted that their career was over. Lance Armstrong didn't. He became obsessed with his own treatment. He researched drugs, demanded second and third opinions. He refused to take the most toxic chemo protocols and insisted on saving his lung function just in case he ever rode again. In the end, he lost a testicle, underwent brain surgery, and even faced death, but somehow survived. Less than a year after his diagnosis, Lance Armstrong got back on a bike. But what came next wasn't just a comeback, it was a transformation. As it turns out, the man who emerged in 1998 wasn't the same one who entered that hospital. He wasn't racing to survive anymore, he was racing to conquer. And this time, he wasn't gonna play fair. In 1998, upon his return, Lance Armstrong signed with the US Postal Service cycling team. But before he joined, there was one non-negotiable condition. He had to subscribe to PedalPulse. You should probably do the same. At the time, the team was substandard, kind of like Movistar in 2020, but worse. The team had no real chance of competing. They were heavily underfunded. But Armstrong didn't see a bad team, he saw a blank canvas, had a chance to build something of his own. Behind the scenes, the team was reshaped around one goal, dominating the Tour de France. And Lance, he wasn't just the face of the rebuild, he was the one holding the blueprint. First he brought in Johan Bruneel, a retired Belgian rider with a sharp tactical mind. Then came Pepe Marti, his personal trainer. Then Dr. Pedro Celaya, Dr. Luis Garcia del Moral, and most importantly, Dr. Michel Ferrari. But you see, Ferrari wasn't just a doctor, he was an engineer of performance. He was highly obsessed with experimenting with blood samples, and when it came to reputation, he was deeply controversial. He had already been linked to EPO use in the early 90s. In fact, in 1994, when asked about the risks of EPO, Ferrari replied, "EPO is not dangerous, it is the abuse of it that is. It's also dangerous to drink 10 liters of orange juice." That quote nearly got him blacklisted. But Armstrong, he didn't care what it looked like, he wanted results. By 1999, everything was in motion. Training was tracked with military precision. Blood valves were logged daily, recovery protocols were customized by the hour. Even travel schedules were built around doping windows. Riders were assigned doctors. Doctors managed doping cycles. And the drugs? EPO, testosterone, corticosteroids, HGH. Delivered in microdoses, timed to avoid detection. Administered in private, even sometimes mid-tour. They were very strategic with it too. It was a system designed to cheat and win. And Lance, he ran it all. He decided who was in, who was out, who got protected, who got discarded. If you questioned him, you were gone. Armstrong didn't just demand loyalty, he weaponized it. His former teammate Tyler Hamilton once recalled,
"And I almost caught Lance, who started 2 minutes ahead of me. And I don't think he was very pleased about that. He made a call straight after he finished to the UCI, the governing body of the sport, and said, this is not normal. This guy's riding too fast. Tyler's riding too fast. You got to get him.
Lance was ready for the 1999 tour, and the timing couldn't have been better. In the wake of the Festina affair, cycling was still suffering from the impact the scandal had on the integrity of the sport. The sport was desperate for a new hero. Armstrong stepped in with the story the world needed. Cancer survivor, all-American underdog, clean champion. In truth, he was none of those things. But by the time anyone suspected the truth, Lance Armstrong was already in yellow, already in Paris, already rewriting history. On the 29th of July 1999, less than 3 years after being told he might not live to see another spring, Lance Armstrong rode into Paris in his now iconic yellow jersey, winning the Tour de France. He did it in 83 hours, 17 minutes, 32 seconds. Lance Armstrong finished comfortably in Paris with a 7-minute and 30-second 7 advantage over second-place Alex Zülle. It should have been the most beautiful story in modern sports, and for most people, it was. To the public, it was a miracle. The man who beat cancer had now beaten the world. A comeback story so clean, so perfect, so inspiring, no one dared question it. News pages called it heroic. Nike launched ad campaigns around it.
For now, I must focus on my treatment. However, I want all of you to know that I intend to beat this disease. And further, I intend to ride again as a professional cyclist.
But behind the podium, something else was brewing. There were signs, small at first, almost invisible to the average viewer. But to those watching closely, something wasn't right. Still, every time he was asked, Armstrong gave the same answer.
People are not stupid. They say, has Lance Armstrong ever tested positive? No. Has Lance Armstrong been tested? A lot.
No, he wasn't using anything. And in one of his now famous post-race moments, he gave a response so smug, so rehearsed, it became legend.
The last thing I'll say for the people that don't believe in cycling, the cynics and the skeptics, I'm sorry for you. I'm sorry you can't dream big, and I'm sorry you don't believe in miracles. But this is one hell of a race. This is a great sporting event, and you should believe. And vive la Tour forever. Thank you.
Over the next 6 years, Armstrong won the Tour 6 more times, 2000 through 2005, 7 straight titles. But behind that streak was a trail of disappearing evidence. Whispers, patterns, leaks, and a handful of journalists who refused to look the other way. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was a crack. The first crack anyone had managed in a story that had been too clean for too long. For example, in 2001, at the Tour de Suisse, Armstrong allegedly tested positive for EPO. The result was never published. The UCI president Hein Verbruggen allegedly stepped in to make it disappear. Strangely, that same year, Armstrong's team donated $125,000 to the UCI, supposedly for anti-doping equipment. No formal investigation followed. When asked about it, Verbruggen dismissed it as a gift, nothing more. But the cracks were getting harder to hide. For example, in 2005, journalist David Walsh released LA Confidential, a detailed investigation into Armstrong's doping. But Armstrong denied it heavily and called it a witch hunt.
You know what they say? They say, it's impossible. So he must be doing something. We only have one thing to hide, and that's our hard work.
Time after time, the same pattern repeated. Accusation, denial, retaliation, silence.
Why would I take that risk? I have everything I need. I have money, I have contracts, I have a family, I have my family's name. Do you think I want my son to go to high school in 2012 and somebody to say, oh, Luke Armstrong, your dad got busted?
But underneath it all, the machine was starting to overheat. Too many witnesses, too many questions, too many secrets. And eventually, someone was gonna talk. On April 30th, 2010, at exactly 2:15 p.m., an email landed in the inbox of Steve Johnson, the CEO of USA Cycling. The subject line read, "Nobody is copied on this one, so it's up to you to demonstrate your true colors." The contents weren't public, not yet, but the sender was. It was Floyd Landis, a former teammate of Lance Armstrong, and apparently a man with an axe to grind. The history between these two wasn't subtle. Lance made him feel like nothing more than a tool, and they both hated each other. It got so bad that Floyd decided to leave the team, but instead of a quiet release, Landis received a call from Armstrong, which according to Landis, Armstrong spent 5+ minutes telling me how much he hated me and he was going to destroy me. So Floyd Landis was forced to resign from the US Postal team because if he left, Armstrong had the tools to, well, Armstrong him out of the sport. When Lance finally retired in 2005, Landis immediately became the next guy to push, and he wasted no time securing his first ever Tour de France title in 2006. However, shortly after, he received a call saying he tested positive for synthetic testosterone.
The winner of this year's prestigious cycling race, Floyd Landis, has tested positive for testosterone.
The UCI also stripped him of his title, and this email? This was essentially his revenge. The message in the mail wasn't public. There were no journalists copied, no press conferences called, just a private document between a disgraced rider and the man at the top of US cycling. The body of the email contained a timeline of events, year by year, rider by rider, detailing exactly how the US Postal Service cycling team had used illegal drugs, blood transfusions, and cover-ups to win the Tour. Landis named Armstrong directly, along with the doctors, the trainers, and the managers who enabled the program. He left nothing out. It was, in essence, a confession, but also an accusation and a warning. At first, the email was ignored, and why not? It was too dangerous and too damaging. No one wanted to open that can of worms. Not the UCI, not USA Cycling, not the sponsors. But it was already too late, because Landis didn't stop there. He sent the same message with more detail to the World Anti-Doping Agency, USADA, and federal investigators. And for the first time, someone finally listened. What followed was the largest investigation in the history of professional cycling. FBI agents, grand jury subpoenas, sworn testimonies. Former teammates began flipping. George Hancappy, Levi Leipheimer, David Zabriskie, all admitted that they and Lance had doped for years. USADA eventually collected over 1,000 pages of evidence, and their final conclusion was Armstrong and the US Postal Service had run the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that sport has ever seen. In 2012, the hammer came down.
This was a day we could not have imagined.
Nike has fired Lance Armstrong over allegations he was doping during races.
Anheuser-Busch, FRS sports drinks, Trek bicycles, and Giro helmets all dropped today like dominoes.
Lance Armstrong was stripped of all 7 Tour de France titles, banned for life from professional cycling, dropped by every major sponsor, and erased from the record books forever. The empire had collapsed, the miracle was dead, and all it took was one man hitting send. On the 17th of January 2013, the cameras rolled. Lance Armstrong sat across from Oprah Winfrey, black shirt, blank face, 13 years of lies behind them. She asked the question the world had waited for.
Let's start with the questions that people around the world have been waiting for you to answer. Yes or no? Did you ever take banned substances to enhance your cycling performance?
Yes.
For a man who controlled every narrative for a decade, even his confession felt calculated. He mentioned no names and took no responsibility for his actions. After his confession, Lance Armstrong was stripped of every single one of his titles and the yellow jersey was erased.
UCI will ban Lance Armstrong from cycling, and UCI will strip him of his 7 Tour de France titles. Lance Armstrong has no place in cycling.
The US Postal Service cycling team lost its sponsors, its reputation, and eventually its existence. On August 10, 2007, they ceased operations and disappeared forever. Livestrong, which was once the most recognizable cancer foundation in the world due to the involvement of Armstrong and his story, immediately lost millions in donations.
We're seeing on the wires of people who've donated to the Livestrong Foundation saying they want their money back.
Investors pulled the plug, and eventually the board cut ties with Armstrong, but the brand was never the same again. Armstrong's doctors faced bans. His trainers were blacklisted. Dr. Michel Ferrari had his medical license revoked in Italy, but his name never left the whispers of the peloton. Johan Bruyneel, the man who masterminded the tactics behind Armstrong's reign, was banned from the sport for 10 years. Teammates who spoke out were cast aside. Floyd Landis tried to rebuild his life, then sued Armstrong for fraud, which he eventually won a $1 million settlement. Lance Armstrong may be banned and disgraced, but the machine that made him? Still alive, still working, still hungry. Somewhere out there, it's already waiting for the next miracle. And that, all of that, because of a series of events in motion by one man who's still alive but still hasn't told the whole truth. The man who kickstarted the biggest scandal in cycling history. That being said, if you're looking for a story that ended on a better note, you should check out my next video, the most disgusting scandal in pro cycling history. A story the UCI would rather you never see. See you there, guys.